Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment. What happens when Hollywood's most stoic action star, a man whose entire career has been built on controlled intensity and unshakable composure, finds himself ambushed on live television by a host determined to tear him down, mark his life's work, and go him into a reaction? What unfolds isn't just another uncomfortable celebrity interview. It's a detonation. It's the moment when British restraint finally snaps, when decades of professionalism give way to justifiable fury, and when one of daytime television's most aggressive hosts learns the hard way that pushing the wrong person too far has consequences. Jason Statham walked into the View studio expecting a routine promotional appearance. Nothing more, nothing less. He'd done hundreds of these. They were predictable, clean, straightforward, even boring. He arrived early, chatted with producers, received the usual list of approved talking points, endured the makeup chair, and stepped onto the stage with his trademark composed energy. The crowd welcomed him warmly. They were excited, respectful, rooting for him from the moment he sat down. The first moments went smoothly. Whoopi Goldberg kept things professional. Sarah Haynes smiled politely. Sunny Hostin nodded thoughtfully. Jason settled into the familiar rhythm of the daytime talk circuit, polite questions, light jokes, predictable transitions. But then Joy Behar leaned forward with that infamous smirk and launched an attack before Jason had fully adjusted in his seat. "Your movies, they're basically just violence porn, aren't they?" she said. No build-up, no context, no humor, just a verbal grenade thrown less than 2 minutes into the interview. The air shifted instantly. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Jason remained calm, offering a measured, reasonable defense of his work, the people behind it, and the global audience who supported it. But Joy wasn't looking for dialogue. She was hunting for a reaction. She doubled down, calling his films toxic, empty, irresponsible, even suggesting he contributed to negative male stereotypes. Jason didn't explode. He didn't lash out. Instead, his demeanor sharpened. His voice dropped. His focus locked. And the pressure in the room grew thick enough to feel. Joy pushed harder, convinced she had cornered him. But what she didn't realize was that Jason wasn't retreating. He was preparing. Quietly, strategically, he was giving her the rope. And soon, very soon, she would realize she'd hung herself with it. Jason's eyebrow lifted just slightly. A micro signal that anyone familiar with him would recognize instantly. It wasn't anger. It was calculation. Joy had thrown the first verbal punch. And now she eagerly swung the second, talking over Whoopi, brushing off Sarah's attempts to redirect, and dismissing Sunny's calming gestures. She was convinced she owned the moment. "Your characters solve everything with violence. Don't you think that sends a terrible message?" She pressed. Jason leaned forward, not aggressively, but with a level of composed intensity that suggested he had reached the exact line Joy assumed he'd never cross. "Toxic masculinity," he repeated slowly, tasting the words, weighing them. Then he said something nobody expected. "That's interesting coming from someone who's built a career attacking others." Joy recoiled, not physically, but internally, her face tightening, her tone sharpening. She tried to reframe the moment as accountability. Jason gave her the space to talk, letting her believe she still controlled the narrative. But the studio audience had gone silent. Everyone sensed shifting power. Joy continued pressing, now suggesting his films were harmful, empty, even mindless. Jason's jaw tightened. His breathing changed. His eyes sharpened. This was no longer a celebrity enduring an uncomfortable interview. This was a man deciding he wouldn't let someone drag his life's work through the mud without answering, really answering. "Mindless," he repeated, letting the word linger like an accusation. "That's what you think the thousands of people who make these films do? That's what you think the millions who enjoy them are responding to?" Joy rolled her eyes, but it wasn't confidence, it was deflection. Jason had shifted the conversation from irritation to precision. He asked her directly what she believed constituted meaningful entertainment. Joy faltered. Only slightly, but enough for the audience, and her co-hosts, to notice. She tried to recover by insisting actors like him had a responsibility to contribute to culture in a deeper way. She moved from critique to condescension, talking at him instead of to him. Jason didn't interrupt. He listened. He studied her. Then he simply said, "Right. So the problem isn't the audience, it's me. Because I make films people actually want to watch. For the first time, Joy's certainty cracked. The tension in the room had become undeniable. Jason hadn't yet taken control, but he was no longer merely defending himself. He was preparing to dismantle her entire argument piece by piece, and everyone watching felt it coming. The temperature on the set shifted as if someone had changed the lighting. Jason's calm was no longer passive. It was a controlled storm. His hands clasped, shoulders squared. He watched Joy with a level of focus that made even the camera operators uneasy. When he repeated her word, mindless, something in his voice changed. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was sharper, heavier, like steel sliding free of a sheath. He explained calmly what his work represented: craftsmanship, teamwork, risk, discipline, global entertainment. But Joy pressed on, insisting he could do better, that he was taking easy money. Then came the moment nobody expected. Jason stood. Talk show guests do not stand. Not on The View. Not while being criticized. Not ever. The room froze. Joy tried to assert control, but standing now felt symbolic. Jason was done playing by the usual rules. He confronted her directly, calling out the ambush, the disrespect, the hypocrisy. He spoke about the people who dedicated their lives to the craft she dismissed in a sentence. Joy fired back, her voice rising, accusing him of arrogance and insecurity. But her arguments were losing coherence. Her co-hosts attempted to intervene, but Joy pushed them away, too committed to the confrontation to recognize she was sinking. Jason's voice stayed steady, calm, terrifyingly calm. He pointed out Joy's pattern, attacking artists, belittling guests, mistaking aggression for accountability. You tear people down, he said, and you convince yourself it's journalism. Joy stood too, an instinctive attempt to reclaim authority, but it didn't work. Jason wasn't shouting her down. He was exposing the weakness in her entire approach. Sarah tried again to redirect the conversation, pleading with the moment to calm. But Joy refused. I asked the hard questions, she insisted. I challenge people. Jason laughed. Softly, without humor. You think this is challenging? This is amateur hour psychoanalysis. The audience gasped. Joy stepped back, not far, but enough to reveal that she finally understood the shift in control. Jason had moved from defending himself to tearing apart the foundation of her argument. And then the most devastating moment landed. When's the last time you created something that could be judged? Jason asked. When's the last time you made yourself vulnerable? Joy didn't answer. She couldn't. The silence that followed hit harder than any shouted insult could have. For the first time in the entire exchange, Joy looked genuinely shaken, because Jason wasn't attacking her. He was revealing her. Joy's earlier confidence had evaporated. She tried to retake the conversation, insisting she was simply holding him accountable. But Jason wasn't letting the moment slip back into familiar territory. He didn't raise his voice, didn't gesture wildly. He simply dismantled her point by point. You ambushed me, he said. You decided before I sat down who I was, what my work meant, and what narrative you were going to force. Joy denied it, but her voice was fragile now, her arguments tightening into self-defense rather than critique. Jason pressed gently but relentlessly. If this was accountability, you would ask a question and wait for an answer. You didn't. You attacked and expected me to shrink. Joy looked away for the first time. It was subtle, but painful for her. Jason continued. You talk about responsibility. Let's talk about yours. Responsibility to be fair. Responsibility to your audience. Responsibility to treat your guests with basic respect. When did that stop mattering? Joy blinked rapidly, grasping for something. Anger. Authority. Anything that could anchor her. I have every right to give my opinion. And I have every right, Jason replied, to point out when that opinion is hypocritical. The studio's silence had become a character of its own. Everyone felt it. Even Whoopi, normally the stabilizer, since the point of no return had passed. Jason began unhooking his microphone. Not in fury, not in theatrics, in quiet finality. Where are you going? Joy demanded, but it wasn't a command. It was a plea, a desperate attempt to reassert control over a moment spiraling beyond her reach. Jason turned, his voice softer than it had been the entire interview. We're done, Joy. We were done the moment you made this personal instead of professional. He looked into the main camera, speaking to the viewers rather than the hosts. I came here to talk about my film, to chat with fans, to have a conversation. Instead, I got a perfect example of how not to conduct an interview. Joy stepped forward, voice rising, insisting he couldn't walk out. This is my show, she snapped. Jason paused, gave the faintest trace of a smile. Tragic, not triumphant. Then maybe, he said quietly, you should start acting like a professional host. And with that, he walked off set, leaving Joy standing in the center of her own domain, suddenly and uncomfortably aware of how small the stage felt, without the control she'd always relied on.